So, welcome to today's episode. I'm your host, Franbi, and I'm thrilled to bring you a conversation that explores leadership through the lens of military service, family values, and career transitions. Our guest today is Lieutenant Colonel Simpson, a distinguished Army officer with an extraordinary career, spanning from air defense artillery to Army acquisitions. His journey has taken him from the borders of South Korea to combat deployments in Iraq and operational assignments in Turkey and Germany. Beyond his military service, he's a dedicated family man, preparing for his transition to civilian life in 2025. Lieutenant Colonel Simpson's story offers valuable insights into leadership under pressure, managing complex military acquisitions, and balancing career demands with family responsibilities. Whether you're a military professional, a leader in any organization, or someone interested in effective leadership principles, today's conversation will provide actionable wisdom you can apply in your own life. Lieutenant Colonel Simpson, thank you for joining us today. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Yeah, no, I thank you for inviting me on. I think this is pretty exciting. So, honored
It
to be
sure
here.
is. It sure is. So before we dive into our discussion topic, I'd like to introduce our listeners to your impressive military journey and background. So would you mind if I share a brief overview of your career?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Lieutenant Colonel graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago, where he received a bachelor's of science in information and decision sciences, and was commissioned in the Air Defense Artillery in 2005. His career began as a platoon leader and battery executive officer at Camp Casey, South Korea, with the 1st Battalion, 3rd Air Defense Artillery. He later served as a military training advisor and operation officer during his combat deployment to southeast Baghdad, Iraq. His operational experience continued as Assistant Battalion S3 with the 5th Battalion, 7th Air Defense Artillery Regiment in Germany, and as a battery commander of the 11th Missile Defense Detachment during deployments to Turkey in 2013. So Lieutenant Colonel Simpson became an Army acquisition officer. He managed requirements for the integrated tactical network environment at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and later served as assistant program manager for the M109 family of vehicles at the Detroit Arsenal in Michigan. He was responsible for tactical radio systems at the Program Executive Office Command Control and Communications Tactical. Most recently, he served as the ATAC System Team Chair for the Integrated Tactical Network at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and is currently a weapons coordinator for the Mid-Range Capability Program Office, serving as liaison between Army and Navy program offices. Lieutenant Colonel Simpson holds a bachelor's degree in Information and Decision Sciences and an MBA focused in logistics and supply chain management. His decorations include numerous medals, to include the Service Medal, Army and Air Force Commendation Medal, and numerous campaign medals. On a personal note, he has been married to his wife since March 2016, and they have 2 children together. He plans to retire in Alabama in September of 2025 to begin his civilian acquisition career. I will have to say that's quite an impressive journey, Lieutenant Colonel Simpson. Again, thank you for your service to our country.
No, I appreciate that. 20 years, so a lot of different things going on.
Yeah, not many people get there, but you can definitely say that's an accomplishment. Highly decorated. You definitely have more deployments than I do, but I'm glad you chose the right branch, the Army. Cool.
Yeah. No, it's been pretty good. It's been a good ride. I feel like I've been blessed along the way. Certainly, there's been some highs and lows in between there, but I think everything happens for a reason, and I'm looking forward to our next chapter as we move forward.
Yes, and I am very excited for you guys as you guys do move forward and whatever chapter comes next. So I'd like to start at the beginning of your military career. What inspired you to join the Army and specifically pursue air defense artillery after graduating from the University of Illinois at Chicago?
Right, yeah. So I actually didn't know much about the military growing up. I didn't have any close family or friends that served. I did have an uncle that served in Vietnam, a couple of uncles that was in the military, Army specifically, but they never really talked much about it. Um, it was purely by accident that I think I joined the Army. There's a funny story that revolves around food and fast food restaurants. Of course, when I turned 18, while I was still in high school, I joined the selective service. As soon as I put my name in the hat for the selective service, I had recruiters coming. And I had a recruiter stop through, and he promised me that if I listened to his pitch, he would give me and offer me lunch. So, as a young 18-year-old, that sounded pretty great. He took me to a fast food restaurant, and I'm sitting there eating this food thinking I'm taking advantage of this guy because he's talking about stuff that I really don't even care about. And, if I can continue to squeeze this juice for what it's worth, if he's going to step and ask it to me again, and treat me for lunch, then certainly I'll take advantage of him. So after about the third or fourth visit of him taking me to fast food restaurant, it was about that time where I needed to either sign paperwork because by this point he'd already had me taking like the ASVAB test. It's basically your entrance exam. I determine what career fields you can go into through the military. And that's when I told him, I said, "Hey, look, I just got my acceptance letter to the school they've been wanting to go to the college, so I guess I can't serve. Thinking that was my way out. Little did I know. Yeah, so no, he was a little disappointed, that he was going to enlist me, but told me about the opportunities with ROTC. There's Training Corps, and that there's opportunities there in which they can also pay for some of my college. So I thought that was actually a pretty great offer. So I reached out to the recruiters at the school I went to and signed up for their leadership classes. And they said, hey, the first couple of years you can do this. Just kind of fill it out. You don't have to have any commitment, but if you can, we'll give you tuition waivers while you're doing this. But if you want to commit, then here's the term. Just, I really enjoyed the people that was in my classes, and I really enjoyed kind of what we were doing. And I figured, hey, I'm having fun with this, and if I can get a commission and have a guaranteed job afterwards, then it's something worth doing. That's kind of the long story short on how I got involved with the military. I never really thought out a career per se. It was one of those sort of things where I would do it until um I stopped enjoying it and or I achieved certain goals
Right.
while serving.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why I'm really excited about this is you and I were both kids from the Midwest, right? I grew up in Illinois. You're from Illinois.
Yeah.
And then, so my dream college to go to was Northwestern because I grew up in the suburbs. So that was like the school to go to. And then the reason why I chose the Army was because I grew up close to Great Lakes Naval Training Center up in Illinois. And I hated every like weekend when I would see these very well dressed Navy people coming into the mall or like in the summer when they would come out to Six Flags. And I'm like, can you guys just like find somewhere else to go hang out? Not the places where I just want to be because it just makes it worse. And then it was always funny because I think subconsciously I joined the military at a very young age, meaning I would see these guys go to like Best Buy, walk out with like the best Alienware computer. They always look good. And I'm like, are these people like James Bond? Little did I know, it's like you really don't know what they were getting into because They would just go for like we call it basic training at North Chicago and then get put wherever they needed to go from there. But yeah, that was like my only criteria was if I ever join the military, I cannot join these people because I'm trying to get out of Illinois. And I have a feeling that if I enlist in the Navy, they're just gonna say, well, you're already here, so why don't you just come on over? So
Right.
that was my thing. And yeah, I kind of had a similar interaction with my recruiter, except I bought the meal. So I don't know if you remember back in like they used to have these vouchers for Burger King. It was like their family meals where you could get like 4 Whoppers, 4 drinks, and like 4 medium fries. And you would pay like, I want to say like 12 or $13 at the time. So I knew my career choices were limited pretty early on. So I'm like, I know for a fact not many people are going to be willing to put up with me.
Right.
So I go into the recruiter's office with like literally a family meal and I'm just munching. Now, granted, I was like 90 pounds at the time. So like I could put down a lot and you couldn't tell. But this recruiter, this sergeant at the time, I would think he was like an E6. He was just looking at me and he's like, so you want to join the army? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, interesting. He's straight up judging me. He's like, well, I'm going to tell you one thing. You won't be eating that when you're in the army. What are you talking about, man? I'm like 17, young. My body, my metabolism's still like 100%. So I'm like, no, dude, like, relax. Right. Surely enough, he wasn't lying because like I got to basic. I think you got a voucher. Well, yours was different probably, but I got a voucher when I flew to basic, which was in Fort Leonard Wood, so St. Louis. But in all Army fashion, at least for us enlisted, they took me from O'Hare to Georgia to fly me back to St. Louis. But then what I splurged on, because they gave us like a $20 voucher, I went straight to the McDonald's thing at O'Hare, or one of them, because they have multiple. And I bought a Shamrock Shake and like, I think a Big Mac meal. Little did I know that was going to be the last good meal I had for the next 6 months. After I got back, I got into Fort Leonard Wood. But yeah, it's crazy how people from walks of the earth, right? They end up in the military, and then you just become one because it's like, I mean, we're all doing the same thing here. We're just trying to survive.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, Great Lakes, I tell you, like, Chicago is definitely a very military-friendly town, and especially when it comes to the Navy.
Oh yeah,
And I know what you're talking about, seeing sailors walking around all, throughout Chicago land area, and yeah, I do the same thing as well. And I didn't have any issues because as a cadet, they gave us a card, an
yep,
ID card, and that got me into free venues. Like
right.
all the museums were free as long as you had a military ID or, a lot of other benefits to that. So it was like us and the Navy.
Yes. I will say their dress blues, looking back, they had us beat, but we don't have to get into that on this podcast. So you were talking, so your first assignment was in South Korea as a platoon leader.
Right.
What were some of the formative leadership lessons you learned in that initial command position?
Yeah, but I think really what I've learned, and I had great platoon sergeant and some NCOs, and they really certainly helped um, pull me in terms of leadership and what I've learned through them and throughout my career is that first and foremost, you need to be willing to do the dirty work that you're asking others to do.
Mm-hmm.
If they see you doing it, then they'll certainly respect you and that they will follow through. And you know where they're coming from, whether that's, vehicle maintenance and actually getting dirty with the soldiers, or if it's just staying late, on those field problems and, you know, trying to knock out the grime work that's involved with being out in the field or letting soldiers eat first, of course, those sort of things. Certainly was one of the things that I learned earlier on as a lieutenant of the service. And the other thing too that I had learned was that just from more of, from advice from at the tactical level of leadership is they always say soldiers do what leaders check. And I think that could apply not just for the army or military, but for common everyday business, even with your children or just throughout life. Basically, what that means is, as a leader, if you are going behind and you're saying, checking whether or not there are air in the tires or that there's window wiper fluid in the vehicles, you're checking for those things that could normally be missed. But when soldiers see you checking for those things, they'll make sure that the second, third go around that those things are squared away, and then they know that you value even the detailed little things. And I see that same kind of mentality that could be used in the civilian world or even as parenting. If your children see you texting to make sure that that they're brushing their teeth or if they're um, making their bed and things like that, you check behind them. They certainly are going to do those things. Um, there's a lot of overlap, I think, with some of the underlinings of military traditions and values that could be applied throughout. But yeah, soldiers do what leaders check, and I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, I remember one of my favorite things to do in the military, and I think it'd be for a lot of people probably because one of their favorites. So my MOS was 31 Bravo, so we were MPs. So we got to try every weapon imaginable in the military. And for me, at the beginning, I hated it because I was always carrying around a 249. And when I tell you when I was 90 pounds, that was not an exaggeration. So the weapon probably weighed almost the same as I did at the time. And then I had like a 100-pound rucksack. Then I had to also carry my M16. And then I also had to carry my Beretta at the time. And I was just like, guys, I mean, if I ever have to go to war with this, they're going to see me a mile away. I'm going to be the guy just like, guys, I need water. Guys, it's too heavy. But,
Right? Yeah,
you
it's a lot.
know, the military does train you for these scenarios, right? Because then they're like, okay, cool. Now just keep your bulletproof vest, keep your ACH on, and now drop your rucksack and go. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is nothing. Like, I could do this. And then, and a lot of the stuff that I learned in the military to this day, there's a lot of stuff that I still carry with me. Like, for example, the whole going to the range and picking up my brass. Like, I'm not one of those guys that shoots and then brings it home and then reloads it. But it's just like, like that level of cleanliness, even with my kids. Sometimes I can see my daughter already like kind of rolling her eyes at me like, Daddy,
Yeah,
it's just my bed. I'm like, you don't understand. We got to start that today, right now. You'll thank me later. But it's, yeah. And at least for myself, I'm really happy that I joined. I was an enlisted. I was not an officer, but I learned so much from my NCOs, even my lieutenants. They taught me a lot of things that today in the areas where I work, I'm able to bring that. And it does help me in some ways to not always try to be looking for recognition. It's just understanding that if I do my job and the next person does their job, the mission keeps on and, the tires stay on the car in a way. So you later So while we touched on this a little bit up at the top, but you later served in combat operations in Baghdad, Iraq. How did that deployment test and develop your leadership approach? And then what principles helped you navigate the pressures of a combat environment?
yeah. So I think anytime someone goes through a combat deployment, especially if they're an advisor, so my role there in Southeast Baghdad in Iraq, we were advisors, so we were embedded with the Iraqi military. Anytime they would go on a mission, we would go with them. And I think one of the things that I learned, and I think you probably other veterans of combat also would learn, is life is short, And one of the things that they had with the Iraqis was inshallah, God willing. I'm sure I'm probably not saying that very well, but I think that changed my perspective on things, in terms of just knowing how to handle stressful situations because you don't really get much more stress, I don't think, um, outside of the possibility of getting blown up or shot, your life taken from you in a violent way. So then things outside of that, just you can kind of put things into perspective and say, oh, okay, well, maybe maybe being, 5 minutes late for something isn't as bad. We're not getting blown up or, there's no IEDs, um, shooting at us and other things. And so I think from that perspective, it really helped me manage um, stress in chaotic environments because there was nothing that topped that, in terms of being in a combat environment.
Yep.
And so, and it also makes me just kind of embrace what we have.
Right.
Living with the Iraqis and just kind of seeing this how they live, from not really having sewage systems and hygiene as what you would find in developed world. You really you really reflect back on how blessed you are with the things that we have as Americans.
Yes.
It's almost like going into a completely different world.
Right.
So, you just become, for me anyways, I learned to just be more thankful for the things that we've got. And, but yeah, I mean, it was a great experience, traveling throughout Baghdad, seeing things that most Americans would never see.
Right.
And then that perspective that you learn when you're in a situation like that.
Yeah, no, I was in the military, but I was never in a combat deployment. So I was, I guess you can say, one of the fortunate ones. I did deploy, but they were all in combat. But I remember when I was going through basic training, it's funny now, but a lot of the people that were in my same, I guess, unit when we were all going through training, they were Puerto Ricans. And I don't know why one of the drill sergeants decided that the thing that they were going to poke at was that they were going to send all the Puerto Ricans to South Korea to get, some mobilization training and then send them all to Iraq. It was like the thing. So all the Puerto Ricans were like always trying to collude in Spanish. Like, what are we going to do? And then the drill sergeant would come in. It's like, well, now everybody can do push-ups because now we speak Spanish here in the Army, huh? But yeah, no, I did. There's a couple people that I did graduate with that did go on to go overseas. And yeah, it really does give you a different perspective. I remember as a kid when we would go to Dominican Republic, we were very fortunate. We were raised here in the United States. So like, yeah, like you were saying, like we have sewer, we have hot water. Like in Dominican Republic, in some places, you only get hot water at noon when the sun's like right over the little like reservoir where they capture the water because it heats it up. But other than that, you're just pretty much you open the faucet, wet yourself, close it, soap yourself up. You do the little penguin dance while you're trying to rinse it all off and
Yeah.
close it again and run. And then I did have an uncle when I was growing up. He had an outhouse. And boy, talk about one thing is to sing about songs about outhouses in elementary school. One thing's to actually see an outhouse. When I saw that thing, I'm
Right.
like, you expect me to what in there? Nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely does give you an appreciation for what we do have here in the States.
I think that's part of the thing about traveling too. 'Cause it was one of the things that I really enjoyed, through my military career is being able to live in other places and travel. Traveling is one of my stronger um, values that I have, self value, and just seeing how other people live, and it makes you really appreciative of what you have. I would say certainly. Yeah, I've actually had one of my bosses who went to Haiti, which is, of course, on the other side of the island there, the
Right.
DR, and he said that the conditions there was worse than what he saw in war-torn countries,
Yeah,
which is sad,
it
but
is.
you know, it's the reality of what's out there in this world.
Yeah. And it's the reality that I mean, it's not on the news every day. So it's something that we are not used to seeing or also aren't aware of unless you're called to go to those countries and then witness that firsthand. 100%. So throughout your early career from South Korea to Iraq to Germany and Turkey, you experienced diverse operational environments. How did these varied assignments shape your understanding of effective leadership?
Yeah. So after my deployment in Iraq, It was basically my branch was, hey, you can go anywhere you want to go. What's a fun place that and we know you like to travel? I was, oh, let's go to Germany. So I went to Germany and I was an assistant battalion S3. And I was a little bit more the more senior captain that was on staff. So I was looking for my next position, which was to take command, which is very competitive.
Right.
And so so for me as the assistant three, there would be times where my boss would be on leave or just, not physically present for, excuse absences. And so I would have to step up and be the S3. And so when you're in that kind of environment and you're working with other captains and now you are the senior captain that you have to lead your peer, that is probably some of the most challenging leadership positions that you can be in is actually leading your peer because of course they're looking at you as an equal, that you're in this position where you have authority over them and others. And so you're always thinking in the back of your mind, like, I doing what I need to be doing. The next person looking at taking my job. Um, and are they going to respect me given that they're the same rank, but I'm just in a different position? And so I think that's where your true leadership comes to play, is when you are in the position where you're either leading your peers or you're leading someone that doesn't necessarily have to report to you, and you're asking them to do things for you, and they could just kind of refuse and say no, not get in trouble. And so I think in those type of situations, the best thing to do is lead by example. I know that's a cliche terminology, but it's really definitely true. And it could be the simple things of showing up to work on time, or just making sure that if you are having others work on a project, and it's going to take extra time beyond your typical work hours, that you stick it out with them and that you help them out and get dirty with them as well. Yeah, I
Right.
think people always will appreciate any sort of leader that's willing to get dirty with the folks that they are leading.
Right.
And so I think being put into those challenging positions, certainly helped me, as a staff officer. And then I did get selected for a really competitive command. It was a really interesting, cool command, after being on staff for about 10 to 11 months. And that's where I had that deployment to Turkey. I stood up a unit and we deployed it out to Turkey. And, from that, I really relied again on my NCOs. I had a really great first sergeant who I could rely on, and I wanted to build up trust with him. And, we, I was really proud of that deployment because we faced some very challenging weather
Right.
because we're deployed on the mountaintop in Turkey,
Wow.
and we're really high elevation. You get wind drift, and so we had wind chill with down to negative 40 degrees at some days.
Wow. It's worse than
It was really
Chicago.
cold. Yeah, it was definitely nothing I was used to. But my proudest thing about that is that we never had anyone get a cold weather injury or anything.
Right.
And so I was really proud of that because we were only living in tents. It was a pretty obscure conditions. And so I think a lot of the reasons why we were successful in that mission was because of the fact that, I was willing to listen to great ideas, regardless of position or rank that people had. And I think being in a staff position, and understanding that, you have to be willing to get down and dirty, even though you have positions of authority, to get down and dirty, and the trust ideas that are great coming from anyone, regardless if they're lower ranking or lower in position. If it's great advice, I'm all about it, and let's make things happen. Let's change things for the better.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm sure that's challenging because, leadership is going to be different when you're downrange in a combat deployment to where you're in Germany, you're not scared of, hey, the people that we're working with during the days, are they gonna backstab us at night? A way different thing. You're worried more about a backstab in the sense of a promotion, maybe. They're gonna try to get it
Yeah.
prior to me. But that's cool. You got to pretty much take a unit out to Turkey. I mean, I have so many questions about Turkey, but that'll be for us offline.
Yeah. It's funny when you said if someone was trying to get that promotion or something, there's literally a guy and he was really awesome. His name was Tim and he was again a peer of mine, but he would have this chart that he always kept in the F3 office. And in that chart was a list of all the other captains that served in the battalion and brigade staff, and he would basically rearrange like the order of merit. So like if someone was at the top of this list, that means they're probably the most likely candidate to get the next command that opens up down to the bottom. And it was always based on feedback from staff call meetings or something like that. The captain, a staff officer got yelled at by the battalion and brigade commander, then he'd be like, all right, I think you just lost a few within your rankings and now you're
Right.
towards the bottom. And so it was always this list. And it was fun. We kind of laughed and joked about it, but it was actually quite accurate.
Yeah.
And the Army is all about this order of merit list,
Oh yeah.
and it's really important, for how the Army operates. And that's how they decide who gets elected for the next position. But it was just kind of a funny reminder of my buddy doing this. And,
Yeah.
it can be very competitive at all
Yeah.
levels across the Army. It's a competitive environment.
It is. It's very competitive. I mean, a lot of the people that are in the military are very competitive people.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to cough. So a big thing for your career was your career took a significant turn when you became an Army acquisition officer. So, what motivated that career shift, and how did your operational experience inform your approach to acquisitions? Because I feel like you had a pretty good career with your main military career, well, MOS, so job and artillery, but I don't know what motivated you to go over to the acquisition side.
Yeah, so the first time I ever heard of anything acquisition related was when I was in Korea as a platoon or executive officer, and my commander was still over and assessed the acquisition, and so he was telling me about it while he was going through the paperwork, and so I didn't really think much of it at the time, but it was just one of those things that kind of fell in the back burner of like in my reference bag, I guess if you will. And then it wasn't until when I was in command in Turkey, and remember I was telling you how cold it got out there. So I, even growing up from the Midwest, never experienced that kind of cold. But I was like, okay, I think there's going to be a time for me to either change where I'm going in the direction of my service in the military, or just get out. I don't know how much more I can stand going to different areas of the world and living in these kind of conditions. I don't know if I'd be able to sustain that. Fortunately, during that time, I had worked around a lot of different contracts for just supporting the logistics on our base. And I had a contracting officer that I was staying in close contact with. And he told me a lot about Army acquisition and from a contracting perspective, and it seemed really interesting to me. And so when the time came for the ability for me to submit a packet to switch over, I did, and fortunately for me, I got selected. And right after our deployment, I basically went back to Germany for a little bit just to get my household goods shipped out to the U.S. and on my way to becoming an acquisition officer.
And that worked out for your benefit, I would say, because, well, I know this, but as you transition out, that job is going to help you transition from your military over to your civilian.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really was very fortunate on how I got selected into acquisition and how things could kind of fell into place. Within the world of acquisition, there's basically like two paths that most officers go through. There is a scientist path, but it's very selective. But primarily in the Army, you've got either contracting or program management. And so I didn't know a ton about either one. Again, while I was in Turkey, I worked with someone that was doing the contracting side of the house, and it seemed pretty interesting to me. But when I did get selected, I was still in Turkey, and they asked, well, where do you want to go? And of course, the place I said, anywhere that's warm all year. But, at the time, it was really cold, and it's like, I didn't care. And so they're like, okay. And then it wasn't until I came to the U.S. and going through the acquisition course where I was going next. And again, I said was I just want a place that's warm. I don't care about anything else. And so I ended up getting stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia.
Oh man.
Where yeah, it's warm out there. Anywhere in the South for the most part, it's going to be warmer than negative 40 degrees. But it was kind of funny because that determined what my um
Path was going to
branch
be.
was going to be, my path
Yeah.
was going to be within Army acquisition. And then of course I ended up meeting my wife while stationed there, and so it was really just kind of by luck that that location is for project management, which is what I'm more interested in versus contracting. And I think a lot of people were when it came to it, because there's like half of us are my class went to contracting, the other half went to project management. And yeah, if you're going through the studies, more people are more interested in project management. And then when at the end, that's when they tell you like, okay, the place you're going, this is the kind of it's either a contracting role or project management role. And so I was really lucky that I selected a location that was for project management. So yeah, so I went to Fort Gordon, and it worked out great because that's how I met my wife.
Oh yeah.
And then basically that, it goes from there. But yeah, just luck and timing, I think.
That's crazy. Dream job and your the love of your life. So it can't get any better than that.
Yeah.
So something that I found really interesting about your bio was, so you've managed projects ranging from
Mhm.
tactical networks to the family of vehicles to radio systems. So what are the unique challenges of military acquisition program management that civilians might not appreciate?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges is that you're dealing with the taxpayers' money, and so you want to make sure that you're using it responsibly. First, if it's project management on the civilian side, it's the company's money that you're using and investing. And so a lot of it driven toward making sure that profit is the motivation, where in the military acquisitions is more driven toward the capability and cost saving wherever possible as well, and schedule. And so I think those are kind of the differences. Granted, I don't have civilian experience in project management, but I do work around a lot of project managers from defense industries, and so I kind of understand their per, where they're coming from their perspective. But of course, when you're dealing with government, there's different layers of uh, some may say bureaucracy, but there's certainly different layers of organizations that all have to um, get together and agree to the path that you're taking a particular program. And so there's definitely a lot of having to understand how the Army works, how DoD works, how does that then translate to congressional things, because we're using the money that was appropriated by Congress, and so now they also get involved, and you have to understand their perspective. And so it hits the strategic level pretty quickly. And anytime you're dealing with a program that has high visibility, you certainly have high scrutiny as well, and so that could cause things to get evaluated over and over before final decisions are made.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, so I've only been a part, and I wasn't the one writing up the proposal by any means, but at one of my previous positions, we were getting ready to renovate one of our areas, bringing in new desks, new equipment, new everything. And then we wanted to get I want to say it's either, and don't quote me on this, 90 inches or like 120-inch, smart wall. So it's like a panel wall that we're going to put all the information that we're constantly, going through up, so that when someone from leadership would come in, they would see that. But it was a $2.3 million investment, I want to say. Again, I'm not really quite sure on the numbers, but one of the things was we needed congressional approval. So there was a committee that had to come out, and then my boss and his second had to pretty much walk them through on why we wanted to spend $2.3 million on essentially a big screen TV,
Yeah.
that we wanted to post, critical information that we have going through the cloud. Short story, it didn't get approved because, that committee, it was a committee, I want to say, of a few people, right? They just deemed that the ask was too much and the capability just wasn't justifiable. So it was like, well, we're going back to projectors and the projector walls, and hopefully this doesn't fall on anyone and everybody can
Right.
keep doing their jobs. So like, I get it. By no means was I involved in like drafting that up and like trying to, it was just, this was what put it in front of us. People we worked with said this was the cost, install everything. Government saw it another way for the same reason, right? The capabilities just weren't there. And for them, it's like, well, if this projector is doing it for more than half the cost, why would we go and invest this money on this? So, yeah. So like when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I 100% agree, because it's crazy. And for me, seeing this, I'm like, well, at least I know my taxes aren't being wasted. So that felt good. So how do you balance, right, the technical aspects of program management with the leadership requirements? So these roles demand both technical expertise and people leadership.
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons, and what I'm about to say wasn't my own unique thoughts here. I've actually heard this from several other leaders, and I believe in it. And I own it as well. I think the reason why you have acquisition officers serving in the military, serving in the acquisition workforce, is because in the military, you are exposed to leadership opportunities that a lot of American citizens aren't exposed to. And starting from a very early on in your career, basically you're an officer once you hit E5, right? You're a non-commissioned officer, and you can hit E5 within a couple of years serving in the military. And you've got a huge pool of folks in the military that go through lots of leadership training, lots of leadership experience. And so one of the things that we bring to the table is our years of military and just basically leadership experience that you don't necessarily have as robust of an opportunity as a civilian typically would. That's kind of what we bring to the table. With the experience that we've got from being warfighters ourselves, we kind of understand it from a user perspective on the materials that are being dreamed up and built and delivered. So we bring that warfighter experience to the table, to say, hey, yeah, this looks great on paper, but you might want to reconsider these things, and these other factors. And so we basically become translator from the engineer who are designing certain things to the end users slash warfighters who are having to use the thing that's being developed. And so I think that's why it's really important to have acquisition officers within the acquisition corps, because that's our main role. Leadership and being that translator between the technical experts versus the end user.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I agree. Like you said, as long as you don't rub anybody the wrong way, as an enlisted, you should be able to hit E5 fairly easy. Now, after that, it might be a little bit more challenging, but as long as you're, squared away when it comes to your physical fitness, you get your job done on time and it's a good job. Yeah, E5 is pretty much guaranteed within your first contract.
Yeah.
So shifting
And,
gears.
and
Oh,
as
go ahead.
as a E5, you're responsible for, a team, perhaps a
Hmm.
squad,
Oh yeah.
and you can be like in your early 20s, leading people, and that's rare, I think, for most people outside of the military.
Yeah, and that's true. It's funny because I tell people, so I was in a reserve unit, so I was part of the reserves here in Maryland. And one of my last drills I attended, our unit was always told these urine analysis were random, but for whatever reason, every time we went, it was guaranteed we were doing a urine analysis on a Sunday. So it was just crazy. So one day they're calling out everybody that has to do it. And for once in my life, I was not called. I don't know why I kept getting called, but like it was guaranteed, like on the clock, like Franco. And I'm like, they picked me again. So this one time I don't get called. So I'm like, got my keys in my hand, getting my assault pack. I'm ready to run out of there before they say we got to clean up or do something. And then I hear Sergeant Franco will be one of the observers. I'm like, Sergeant Franco, I know everybody that's in here and there's not another Franco. So then I see one of my NCOs running in. They're like, no, 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 that's not, no, 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 he didn't. He's not doing it. So then they're like, disregard Sergeant Franco. I'm like, can you guys call me my correct rank? Not Sergeant, not trying to watch another man pee. But yeah, it was just one of my funny stories from when I for sure. Like it was guaranteed. Now what my issue was, I was selected. I was gonna go to the BLS, which is the basic leadership course, but I just decided not to re-enlist, and I was just like, look, guys, I'm done. I'm gonna go enjoy life. And military, army being army, said, well, we'll pull this from his profile, and surely enough, I retired or I left the military as a specialist. But I'm proud of it. So
Yeah, yeah.
but so shifting gears a little bit. So let's shift over to your personal life. So you've been married to your wife since 2016 and you have two beautiful sons. How have you recently balanced the demand of military service with family responsibilities?
Yeah, so that's really interesting because I came to this crossroads where you have to make decisions on military or family because there's sacrifices, that will have to be made, and that's why they say, you join the service because you are literally you're serving, and it comes at a cost. And so I knew that having the family that I wanted and values and looking at my values and families up there in the top of my list of my own personal values and understanding the demands that it takes to be in any sort of key leadership role as an O4, as an O5 in the military, there's going to have to be some sort of trade-off. And so because I was starting kind of later in life with children, um, I and wanting to be there for them, I consciously made decisions towards the end of my career to go ahead and start to the sunsetting, if you will, from the army life, so I can focus more on family life.
Right.
Those are the choices that you have to make. And I had a lot of conversations with very senior leaders within the army. I'm talking flag level officers who say, hey, look, if you want to continue on earning more rank and responsibility, you're going to literally have to make a decision on how you're going to balance that with your family. And so
Correct.
for me, I knew that, based on the stage of where I'm at in my life, um, I wouldn't be very successful trying to balance both a command position as well as uh, the father that I want to be.
Correct.
So so I ended up putting in my paperwork to retire, and I don't have any regrets, and I'm happy with what I've done in the military and what I've accomplished and achieved the goals that I did want while serving. So now it's time to go into a new chapter.
Right. A really good new chapter, by the way. But yeah, no, I 100% agree because I always said I didn't want to have kids. Obviously, I joined the military very early, 17. And then I met my wife pretty early on too. Again, I was just a reservist. But I always knew that at least when we got to basic training, I think one of the first phrases that were uttered was, you are now part property of the Army, and whatever you thought your priorities were are not your priorities. Your priorities will always be, your country first, so military, and then whatever you want to put after that. But the mission always comes first. And that was, I think, one of the only things that I carried from from basic training. And early on, I decided in my career that it probably wasn't going to be something I did long term, just because I didn't want to have to sacrifice my family for something that I signed up so early, and then knowing what the cost would be. I deployed to, again, a non-combat area, but this was in 2014. I think it was 2014, 2015. And we're talking that this area I went to, it felt like I was going to end up getting not married by the end of this deployment because the internet was so bad. It was still dial up and everybody was trying to call at the same time, that my fiance, now wife at the time, would say something and I would hear something totally different. I'm like, you know what? Let's just call it a day here. Like, send me a message or whatever, and I'll try to read it because, like, it's impossible to understand what you're saying. And then after I enjoyed my deployment, I love the guys I was there with. I mean, it's true when they say the people you deploy with, you build a bond that's pretty much inseparable. Like, the first person I had on this podcast was one of my military buddies that I deployed with, because it's just like, there's a bond there that I don't think I could ever replicate that outside of, my marriage to my wife. But it's just like, it's there forever. Like, whenever, and if any of those guys ever need my help, they know that they can just hit me up and I'll make whatever arrangements I can to be there, or at least help them get the help. But yeah, my wife came to me and tells me like, hey, I'm pregnant after we got married and I came back and everything. And I'm like, okay. And then, I was happy, but I was kind of shocked. So I was like, I put myself in a mental place where I said, I don't want to have kids until I finish this contract I'm on. And surely enough, my wife tells me, hey, I'm pregnant. I get a call from my first sergeant at the time. And they're like, Franco. I'm like, first sergeant, what's up? And he's like, I got good news for you, Franco. I'm like, oh, great news. Okay, yeah, go ahead. You're on the sheet to deploy again. I'm like, did I not just get so much deployment? Why was that good news to me? Like, I don't want
Right?
to deploy
Yeah.
again. Like, what? So on one side, I have, right, the thing, right? The military is always first. And then on the other hand, I have my wife, telling me, 9 months, we're going to be responsible for someone else. And I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
luckily, I guess not luckily, some medical things came up to where they said, hey, we can't support that downrange. We can't get you the medicine you need. So last minute, like, I'm literally headed to get ready to mobilize. And they're like, nope, you've been cut. I'm like, you guys couldn't have called me before I dragged 2 duffel bags and a rucksack and
Right.
an
Of course
assault
not.
pack through Reagan? No way. This is what we're doing. But it's like, okay, I'll go home. But yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like, there gets a point, and I'm not trying to compare my E4 struggles to you running a command possibly. But yeah, it was, for me at least, it became, I realized really quick, this is not the life I want with a family and kids, because I will miss a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of that missing a lot was something that I knew I didn't want, and like you're saying, the army will certainly get what's out of you, and they will ingrain to you their values. And then at some point, you have to build your own values outside of what the values that the Army tells you you have.
Right.
And guess what? Like family's not one of the values that they have in their acronym for their values. But yeah, it's one of mine. And so when that became more important to me, and then I had to realize that it was time to make a switch. So
Right.
yeah.
So a lot of people say, right, military service often involves deployments and relocations. So how have you and your wife approached these challenges as a team?
Yeah. So I think first, so I met my wife when I was in Georgia, and we had gotten engaged, and we're planning our wedding in upper Georgia, like a northern part of Georgia. And so, we were thinking that this will be a local thing for us until we got military orders saying, hey, guess what? You're going to be moving within the next 30 days. And by the way, you're moving to this place called Warren, Michigan. So I, when I found out about that at work, I called my wife and said, we're going to Warren, Michigan. I'm not exactly sure what that is. And she looked it up. She's like, oh my gosh, that's Detroit. And I was like, oh, okay. That was a dramatic event for her because she's never lived, in the north.
Right.
For me, it was kind of exciting because it was closer to home. I can go to a Cubs game if took the Amtrak and things like that. So so that was probably like for her the hardest thing. For me, I was already kind of used to moving a lot. Because I'd lived in multiple countries before, and so it was not as difficult for me. And then we actually really enjoyed our time in Detroit. And then from there, we went to Leavenworth,
It's a nice place.
and it was great because I went to a school while I was there and ran into a lot of folks that I had known previously from other assignments. And so there was a lot of there that we both, my wife and I both got to embrace. And then we got pretty lucky because after a year there, we moved to Maryland, and we've been living in the state of Maryland for longer than any other place that I've lived as an adult. So, we spent about a good 5 years near the Aberdeen Proving Ground area
Right.
and built a lot of good friendships there. And I think my wife really enjoyed that. And then moving to California, Maryland, near the Tucson River Air Base, and um, great friends here. And so, I think it's the friendship that really helps in terms
Yeah.
of the moves that we've made. And now that we're moving closer towards her family, I think she's really embracing that. And so, I think that's really helped in terms of the challenges behind a lot of our moves. It's just the relationships that we build while we're there.
Right. Yeah, I think definitely like having a community or being able to build a community when you get there, that definitely helps for sure. So I get this question, but a little bit different. But as a father of two boys, what values are most important for you to instill in your children?
Yeah, so I have like five like core values: religion, family, um, adventure, and under adventure, I have like travel and different foods and learning different things. Independence is another value, and achievement. So those are my five core values. I would say certainly like the, the first two that I mentioned, religion and family, I think is really important because it gives you a foundation. Religion gives you a foundation of how to act amongst others, treating others as how you want to be treated. And so that is one of the things that I want to instill in both of our kids, and just making sure that they have that strong foundation. And then of course family, because it's really important that we take care of each other and that we love each other. The family is kind of like that core principle
Yes.
to help get you there. It's that again goes back to the foundation. I think having strong family values build, that foundation that you need growing up. Some of my other values that I have and how I would instill it in my children. And so, for example, adventure. I would like for them to be able to see things, within the United States, go to different parks, going to different museums, going and doing travel outside the United States and seeing different things. I would love to take them both to Puerto Rico.
Yes.
As they certainly have some roots there, and so I really want them to be able to see the world and explore the world for what it has to offer. And so we've already got our oldest son a
Yes.
passport already, so he's ready. He's ready
Oh
to
yeah.
go, and they've both been on numerous airplane rides, and so but I certainly want to make sure that I get an opportunity to get them exposed to different cultures. And I think again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier in this conversation, where the more you see of the world, and especially places that may not have the things that you have the privilege to have, the more you go to appreciate what you do have. So I think that's really what I want them to be exposed to.
Yeah, I agree. On the passport aspect, yeah, our two oldest kids have passports, and my wife should be giving birth to our last child any day now. I keep glancing over at my phone because I'm like, well,
Yeah, I know.
if she texts me, I don't want to miss that because we'll
Wasn't
have
sure if
to.
we were going to even have this podcast today.
Yeah, I told her, I'm like, look, you can have the kid any day but Saturday. So, let's talk to God about that one and see what we can work out
Yeah,
with it. Or after the podcast, I was like, there's no problem, just not during.
right.
But yeah, that's something at least I struggle with, right? Like I love giving my kids experiences, I guess is what we call them, right? Uh, we got our kids passports. Obviously, both of my parents are from Dominican Republic. So I tell them they're 100% Dominican for sure. Cause I try to tell my wife, we'll just adopt you. But
Mhm.
it's hard for me to just, grab them for a week in the summer and say, hey, let's go. Cause, you know, selfishly, I'm like, there's so much to explore here in the States that to justify a flight out there. Where on the other hand, my neighbors, they also have family internationally. And every summer what they'll do is they'll just grab their daughter, one of them will fly with her to their native country. And then they'll have her spend time with one of their families. And then before that person leaves, they'll transition the daughter over to the other family so she can get both aspects of that other culture. And that's something I look up to them about because it's like, wow, I wish I would have just instilled this in my kids from an earlier age. Not that they're old or by any means or that we can't start doing it, but I just wish my level of urgency, because that's something we did every summer. As long as I didn't have to do summer school, my parents, the second we were done with school, it was my mom. She was a teacher up in North Chicago. So once all of our schools were done, we would get on a plane, fly down to Dominican Republic, and spend the summer out there. And my grandpa, he had a farm. So he would have this Americanized guy, and everybody knew it because every time I went somewhere, they're like, oh, there comes the American. There comes the American. I'm like, guys, I'm as Dominican as you guys. Just I live over there. I speak Spanish too. But it was, and then my grandpa would come out to me and say, mijo, go and herd the bulls or the cattle. And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm American. What are you talking about? I'm not gonna hold no stick with a white or a red rag on top so these guys can clobber me. Or my grandma would say hey, help me catch the chicken. And I'm over here watching this bird just flap, 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 flap. And I'm trying to grab it. Finally, she'd say, no, go sit down. I'm going to call the dog. And I just see the dog just fly by me and just grab that chicken by the neck. I'm like, man, I might be American. But it's experiences that I look back to today and I cherish, right? Because my parents went above and beyond to give us those experiences. Could we have stayed in the States and possibly done other stuff? Yeah. But I look back on those moments where, I got to speak to my grandparents in Spanish. I got to experience the culture. Again, I probably would have enjoyed singing about outhouses and never having to experience it. But getting to go to my uncle's outhouse, getting to see that, and then joining the military and just seeing a hole in the middle of somewhere, and they're just saying, yep, that's where you got to go if you need to go. I'm like, oh, that's normal. Let's do this. Right. I wasn't
Yeah.
as freaked out because I had those previous experiences. So yeah, I think that's something I want to do more. with my children is just give them that other aspect of like, look, this is how other people live. This is how our family, everything is America. And we are pretty fortunate. So what lessons from your military leadership experience have you found the most applicable to family leadership?
It kind of goes back to a little bit of what I was talking about earlier in terms of what soldiers do, what leaders check, but also knowing how to follow
Right.
it really does make you a better leader. So, of course, as a parent, your children are following your lead. But you've been in that position before, and you know when you see something and you're the one as the follower, you may not know what right is, but you know what wrong is, right?
Yes.
You get see when there's certainly problems, and so having been and having that experience as all kids do, with seeing whoever their guardians are, and leading from them or following them, it makes you basically take those lessons and tweak it towards your own way of how to be a parent. So I think that kind of um, thing that I learned in the military can certainly applicable as parenting. And then of course the discipline that you get as a military leader, you certainly want to install that as well with our kids.
Yeah. Yep. So as you get ready to transition, what aspects of your military experience do you believe will be most valuable in your civilian career?
Yeah, I think the most valuable thing that I would have to offer would be experience as a leader for the past couple of decades, but also just the ability to adapt quickly. Because you have to in the military, like you don't stay in one job for very long. Typically, you don't, and so you're constantly moving, and you're in a new environment, and you've got new things that you have to quickly learn to be successful. And I think those are the things that I'd be able to bring to the table is like, hey, I understand what it means to be a change agent because that's pretty much what you do when you're serving in the military, and knowing how to treat others and bringing teams together, because that's what you do at all echelons of the military. You're always working with a buddy or a team, regardless of your rank in the military. And so, that's just something that we're used to doing,
Yes.
and that we bring to the table.
Well, I have good news for you. As my first sergeant once said, we're at my favorite part of this interview. So this whole interview, I've just been grilling you back and forth on questions. But now, Lieutenant Colonel Simpson, I want to say we've had a fantastic conversation about your career, leadership philosophy, and family life. Now, I'd like to switch gears for some rapid fire questions to help our audience get to know you better on a personal level. Are you ready? So, what's one book that has significantly influenced your leadership approach?
I guess I would go with, that's a good question. I don't know about that one. Maybe 1984. That was the recent one that I read over again.
That's a good book.
Very interesting, weird book.
Yeah, it is. It's like Forrest Gump. You can't go wrong with Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
So, morning routine or evening routine, which is more important to you and why?
I think morning because that's up your day. So if you have a bad morning, then it prickles.
Yes, that is true. So, what's one military tradition you plan to maintain in civilian life?
Getting places early, and not necessarily in the army. Like if you're on time, you're late,
Yes.
and so I typically like to be early.
Okay. Good luck. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's more challenging with kids for sure.
Right. So, if you could have dinner with any military leader from history, who would it be?
Maybe Napoleon, just because of his contributions to so many things. But of course, we'd probably need a translator.
I got you. I'll be your translator. So, what's your go-to stress management technique during challenging projects?
Just going for like a walk or something like that, and it always helps if you have a battle buddy to go with you who you can vent things to and help you get your mind right before going back to work.
Yes, 100%. So, what is your favorite family vacation destination?
So our next vacation that we're planning on taking is to um San Diego, California, and it's a place that my wife and I have gone a few times, and then we're gonna bring the kids with us for this vacation trip. There's a lot of things, a lot of cool things to do.
There is.
That and of course Orlando is always a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love. Okay, so full transparency, my first time going to San Diego was this past year. And I was there, I want to say in August. And for whatever reason, the whole time it was like 54. And again, we're being transparent here, so don't judge me. I was that guy that was always saying, why are people in California, San Diego specifically, always wearing sweaters? I understand now. That was cold.
Yeah.
Coming from the East Coast, and I was there for like a week, I was freezing. So
Yeah.
I get it. So what's one piece of technology you're most excited about for the future of defense?
AI, I think artificial intelligence is going to do a lot of great things, just from admin to actual helping in our decision-making processes.
Yes, I'm excited. I mean, I work with AI in my field, so I love every bit of it. So, best leadership advice you've ever received?
I would probably say it goes back to making sure you understand what your values are outside of just like the Army values and that you're meeting those needs. And so for me, family is certainly growing more and more important than some of the other values that are than the Army have those same values, but family is starting to grow more important to me. So that's why I'm retiring.
Yeah. So, coffee or tea?
I'm a coffee guy.
Right answer. So, what hobby or activity are you looking forward to having more time for after retirement?
So I really do enjoy travel, and I've done that both leisurely and officially, but I think I would like to just focus more on it as I retire that and maybe getting back into painting. That's something that I used to do in my younger days. I wouldn't mind getting back into doing.
Most memorable moment in your military career?
Most memorable, I guess maybe it was my commissioning. I think that was a big deal. It so happened that I think it happened right around my birthday as well as college graduation. So it was a lot going on.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, Lieutenant Colonel Simpson, as we
Yep.
bring our conversation to a close, I'd like to ask what final wisdom you would share with our listeners about effective leadership, whether in military service, business, or family life.
Yeah, I would say certainly don't be afraid to get dirty, right? And do things that you would expect others to do and take sound advice from those who may not necessarily be in the position or rank structure of higher. They could still add value to the table. And so I would say like just listen to sound advice from those who you work around as well.
I 100% agree. I could not have said that better myself. Again, thank you for sharing your experiences and wisdom with us today. For those in our audience who might be interested in military careers, particularly in acquisition, or for veterans preparing for civilian transition, are there any resources you'd recommend?
Yeah, there's a lot of different places like I think Military One Source has got a lot of information on there, and then there's a lot of veteran groups that are out there, and so you can do sort of internet search, but there are definitely a lot of great resources, and at this point, as I'm transitioning, I'm learning more and more about those resources, and it can be a little overwhelming, but I think it's all great that there's so many people and organizations that are out there that are trying to support veterans. And so there's a lot of different places you can go.
But yes, 100% agree. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, Lieutenant Colonel Simpson. Your journey
Oh,
from
wait.
air defense artillery to acquisitions, your leadership across diverse operational environments, and your insight on balancing career and family responsibilities provide valuable lessons for leaders in all walks of life. To our listener, I hope you found today's conversation as enlightening as I have. I leave you with this. Identify one leadership principle from our discussion that resonates with you and implement it in your professional or personal life this week. Share your experience with us on social media using the Franbi effect. Until next time, this is Franbi reminding you that leadership isn't just about position, it's about impact and service.